Our first speakers today are from Chanl Health. We'd like to welcome Jared Sealing and Barb Fagan. Jared is the founder and the CEO of Chanl Health. Jared is really committed to taking technology and using that power of technology to improve patient care and to improve the lives of patients, as well as make things easier for the healthcare provider. I think most of us have gotten to know Jared lately, but a person that probably needs no introduction to the cardiac rehab community is Barb Fagan. Barb's past president of the West Wisconsin Society, past president of AACBPR. I've known Barb for years and years when she ran the program at Community in Menominee Falls, now part of Freighter. She's a triathlete, biathlete, marathoner. I don't know if that speaks well for her or she needs some analysis, but Barb is an amazing person who has now entered into the world of business and has partnered with Jared to help deliver Chanl Health. Last year, they spoke at our fall conference, very, very well received. And quite frankly, Barb and Jared, you and Dr. O and Dr. Lee are responsible for our highest enrollment. We have over 500 people enrolled for today's conference. So thank you for that. Last year, they sort of talked a little bit abstract about what you can do for home-based cardiac rehab. And today I'd ask them if they could present a more practical view on how you can deliver home-based cardiac rehab. So without further ado, Jared, Barb, I'll turn it over to you.
Right. Thank you, Keith. It's always such a nice introduction I get from you. You know, one of the things in cardiac and pulmonary rehab world, the one of the advantages is the friendships and the community that we just have the privilege to create. And I know, Keith, I think you and I go back at least 20 plus years. So the friendship's very valuable, and thank you. And thank you for having Jared and myself. We don't need to go through this slide. Just a quick, short, description of what Chanl Health is. We partner with healthcare organizations across the country to help them implement virtual cardiac and pulmonary rehab. And we also have a virtual program management system, which those programs that implement a hybrid program can use technology to make their lives more easy and to really provide a patient experience that honestly, in some situations, can be even better than the limited 3 times a week that we see them on site. So a quick agenda. Most of us have, been in these webinars, and we've talked a lot about hybrid basics, but we're going to do just a quick, review again. We're going to talk, as Keith had asked us, about program structure and design, a little bit about home exercise management, and then really what would some of these virtual real-time sessions look like. So I don't think I need to overemphasize this, but I think I do. Why are we providing a virtual hybrid delivery model for patients in cardiac and pulmonary rehab? To help more patients, to reach more patients. However, there tends to be a very big misconception that virtual rehab is temporary. And it's only here as long as COVID and this pandemic is kind of in our world right now. And I'm just wanting to share just a couple quotes with you. I could probably share 50, but we don't want to spend the whole time talking about that. But here's just a couple quotes that I've received from programs across the country. We've looked into the virtual option, but sorry guys, I got to move your faces. We've looked into the virtual option, but our attendance in our program demonstrates no need to start virtual at this time. We're back to our pre-COVID numbers. Our patients are participating. We never shut down. We let our patients decide if they're comfortable or not. And we've polled them to see if they were interested in online classes, and most were not. And then the last one, right now we're opened, we're at capacity, we've considered virtual and a hybrid, but right now there is no need. So every time we hear there is no need, that's telling me that we're continually focusing on a virtual hybrid option only as a temporary solution to COVID. But if you think about it again, this is a great illustration. If we look at industry average of attendance and on-site enrollment for cardiac rehab, we still are only capturing 20 to 30%, and we have a 30% 30-day readmission rate. When COVID came, that 20 to 30% was decreased even greater. You know, some programs that are actually privileged and open are still seeing reduced capacity by upwards of 50 and 60%. But the question is, what if we took the same effort and focus that we're placing right now on reaching this 20% that are coming during COVID and then the reduction in volume? What if we took that effort and put it on the 80% that aren't coming? Guys, the impact would be phenomenal. I don't have to go over this a lot, but why don't our patients come? Work issues, travel issues, they can't get transportation. High copays continually impact our patients. And there's a lot of patient experience issues. Parking, uncomfortable exercising with a lot of other people, the perception of the lack of importance of what cardiac and pulmonary rehab is. And now you throw in the fear of COVID. But again, this is all about growing the pie. We're trying to increase total enrollment of both our on-site programs and virtual engagement with our patients. You've probably heard me say this before, but we can't any longer feel that our programs are successful when they're full, when we're missing 80% of the population who could benefit from cardiac and pulmonary rehab. Just an aside, one of our programs out in Washington, Olympic Medical, doubled their enrollment by simply offering a virtual option.
Thanks, Barb. Making sure I'm off mute here. The second misconception we hear is that the virtual and hybrid rehab should closely replicate the on-site rehab experience as closely as possible. And if we look at, the joint scientific statement that came out, I guess, coming up on 2 years ago, I think in May, what they were really looking at when they defined what home-based cardiac rehab was and some of the benefits of that model, they weren't actually looking at the real-time video sessions that are being implemented today. What they were mainly focused on was a model that has what we call the asynchronous engagement aspect. So it was less, many of the studies they looked at did not include any real-time video session aspect at all. And a couple of quotes from that we continue to point people to from the joint scientific statement is that the home-based cardiac rehab can expand the breadth and depth of educational, counseling, and monitoring options for patients. The center-based programs are usually limited to 3 to 4 hours of weekly in-person contact, but most patients with CVD spend over 5,000 waking hours each year independent of medical providers. And so it's critically important to arm them with behavior change strategies that can be implemented in their home, work, or community environment. So what is the same and needs to remain the same is the core components of cardiac rehab, regardless of whether the patients are on site or they're on a real-time video or they're doing things on their own. We still need to address the core components of the rehab. But what is different is that with some of these asynchronous tools and the real-time video tools, it gives us the opportunity to have more touch points on the patient and deliver the program in a way that fits better into their lives. So typically we focused on getting a patient on site for phase 2 rehab. We can now start patient activation and education prior to that. We can give them more flexible options during phase 2 and continue to engage them through a phase 3 program. The virtual program management tools out there will help you in keeping those patients engaged and adherent when we're not on the real-time video calls. It can help deliver the education and the resources at a more convenient time and location for the patient when they're ready to hear that. And then we can add the virtual coaching and that data tracking asynchronous. And that frees up time on those real-time or on-site sessions to really dig into the coaching and the counseling for that individual patient. So with that in mind, we wanted to cover some of the few examples and some considerations as you're setting up what your program structure is going to look like. So again, how we think about these hybrid programs is really how do we give the patient the most value with a mixture of 3 main things: the on-site sessions that they may be attending, those virtual real-time sessions that they may be completing over video, and then the asynchronous tasks that they may be completing. So exercise itself can occur under any of those 3 categories, and it will. Barb often mentions that we've been asking patients to exercise outside of the on-site sessions for many years, so that's not new. But the exact mixture of setting the patient's expectations of how they'll go through, how frequently they'll come on site, how frequently they would join a video session, and what's expected of them outside of that time is what you need to decide as a program. And there's no one size fits all. So we work with a lot of different programs. They have a lot of different constraints and different patient populations. And so there's a lot of things that might go into the specifics of what your program will look like. So what's the structure of pre-enrollment and enrollment to on-sites? Are you going to use a care management software platform? Which staff are responsible for the real-time video or the asynchronous follow-up? Can this roll out within the current staffing model, or do you need additional staff? Are there other services integrated? Are you including a dietitian or other elements of care? Are you using a monitoring device? Are you going to provide a monitoring device? We'll note later that almost all programs that we're aware of are not monitoring patients in their home during the video sessions or during the asynchronous sessions. Where is the information tracked? Do you require some new processes and procedures? And then a really big one we always work with every group is there an emergency plan in the event you did need to respond to them? And these are things your program needs to think through, and we often help programs walk through. As an example, we wanted to show you a structure of UCSF Health and what they have put together. So this is a fairly complex diagram, but I think it does a really good job of visualizing what their base program would look like. So when a patient first enrolls, they'll start out with a phone or video visit with the provider. They'll do the intake interview with them and collect all baseline metrics as well. They'll do their first ITP creation, and they'll ask that patient to come on site to center-based exercise for 6 to 8 sessions. Within that time, they'll start them with their home-based exercise sessions. And at that, about week 4 or within that area, they'll switch to predominantly home-based sessions with a center-based session mixed in at day 30, 60, and 90. They'll continue with the phone and video sessions weekly with those patients. And they'll also ask them to join a peer group week session. And Barb will talk a little bit more about those when we talk about what the real-time video sessions can look like. So this is what we call a transition program, where the program starts off with the patient attending mainly on site, and then they transition to mainly being a home-based program. They put together a great decision matrix which they said we can share for how to identify which patients are best candidates for their pure center-based, their hybrid, or their fully home-based. So the first is around risk. So are they low, moderate, heart failure, or high risk? And they have their own criteria in more detail. But there are high risk patients who would be excluded from the home program, and then some more details needed if they're a candidate for the hybrid. The second is transportation work. So if they're under an hour drive, they're candidates for all of them. If they live over an hour away, or they have transportation issues or work conflicts, they're a better candidate for the hybrid or home. Home and community exercise. So is it challenging, or are they able to do home exercise? And they have some criteria here that helps identify which patients may have challenges doing the home or hybrid. Phone and video capabilities, kind of their tech savviness is a criteria. And then the copay is also a consideration that they have. And Barb, do you want to talk about this one?
I'm happy to. So we're working with a group out in Massachusetts, Brigham and Women's Health and Hospital, and they've actually created their program structure to resemble what I'm about to share with you. And they're going to launch this March 1st. So the patients will be enrolled in their hybrid program, and they've chosen Zoom. They do a phone interview beforehand, but if they can do Zoom, they'll do a Zoom interview. And then the way they've set it up is similar to a cohort. So they're offering one class per week, and there's going to be 5 patients per class, and it will be a 12-week class, and they've set aside 90 minutes. It's not going to be a 90-minute class, but they've sort of given themselves some grace period within the day and that structure, just like if some things happen. But the class itself will be between 31 and 60 minutes long. So how they're going to do it is, prior to the class, they'll ask all the patients to do their vitals and be ready to share them. They will be using some technology platforms as well. And if you use something like the Chanl Health Better Hearts platform, we're able to have the patients put that data in, and then it will show up on the dashboard prior to you doing your virtual session with that patient. So you'll have the vitals prior to that. The first 5 to 10 minutes or so, it's going to be simply a meet and greet, where they're going to talk with the patients, how's your day, sort of that chit chat. And then the bulk of their exercise is really going to be a group-led activity by their physical therapist or their exercise physiologist. And it's going to focus a lot on functional fitness or teaching patients new TheraBand exercises, with the goal to educate, to instruct, to cue as they're watching patients do a new activity. And it's not simply to sit back and watch someone do that activity. And that's really important, because remember, and I think Jared may have said it earlier, but it is our responsibility as a program to provide value to our patients, whether they're on site with us or they're in a virtual session. What we're providing to that patient needs to be of value. And remember, any of these virtual sessions that we're billing, that patient who has a copay will also be required to pay that. They're not going to have the patient do a cardio activity during their virtual session. And they're under the belief that, and as am I, that if the patient does need to do their cardio, they can do it later that day. They don't have to do cardio every day. And in this particular structure, what they're doing is functional fitness or strength training, asking the patients to do the cardio on their own or skip for that day. And then the rest of the session, which I find this to be incredibly valuable, is going to be an education topic. So their 12-week program, they will have an education topic once a week that they can all like discuss, have some Q&A, and then really having that cohort, it's going to be as if the patients were coming on site and they started to know their friends that are in that same class. And then they're able to, because it's real-time audio-visual, has some amount of exercise, and it was greater than 31 minutes, they're able to use the 93797 charge code and then the PO modifier. And then the other thing is that one of the things we're finding too, and Jared really talked nicely about this, is we get stuck in this mindset that if we do a virtual session, that we have to replicate what we do in the center. And I'm going to ask you to sort of open your minds to think, well, how could we do something different? Because the virtual delivery model, and Dr. Katayan says this time and time again, COVID has really presented us with opportunity. And if we're open to it and we allow ourselves to see it, we can be quite creative and innovative. And I want to share with you one of our programs that is in Denver. And Denver Health chose to move all of their classes outdoors. And the reason they did that is they were able to see all of their patient volume versus had they stayed inside, it would have limited the amount of patients because they have a very, very small gym. So they have no wait list. They've got about 90%, 90+% participation. So they did not lose any of their patients. And they offer morning classes and they offer afternoon classes. They have telemetry as needed, blood pressure is needed. So they're really, again, treating the patient as an individual patient. And then this video, go ahead and just play it, Jared. There's not going to be sound, but just go ahead.
This is our cardiac rehab cart. This is what we take outside for our rehab. On it, we have the scale for our heart failure patients, if we need. We have a bag of towels, in case we need some towels. We have a bag full of glucometers, sharps, masks, some sugar source, gloves, in case a patient has low blood sugar. We do instruct the patients to bring their own glucometer and sugar source, but just in case someone forgets, we are able to test for that. We have an oxygen tank with a cannula also in that red bag. If they are on oxygen, we do ask them to bring their own tanks, but just in case we have extra. There's no trash right out here, so this is where we are putting all the wipes and everything after cleaning. Chairs for the patient. Usually we have about 4 chairs. They get kind of heavy, so we do have 6 patients at a time, but only bring 4 chairs. In this bin, come closer, we have our Sandy wipes, hand sanitizer, before, after, during exercise, stethoscope, AED, the first aid kit with the mask, some other things in here,
Go ahead, stop.
some TheraBands.
You guys can watch the rest, but you get it. You get it. So the thing with them, again, it's like super creative. And the one thing that I really want to stress in this slide is that the majority of their patients that come to their on-site program, they don't have any home exercise equipment. So they're constantly trying to think like, what can we do that's different and sustainable? So when they take them out to this park and they have 2 staff for the 6 patients, they're doing walking, they're doing walking with them. Some of them are jogging, they're doing intervals. They play disc golf. They have a sidewalk chalk that they've created, agility courses. They've had tremendous patient satisfaction because some of the patients actually bring their family members with them. And so they walk together, and some have actually brought their dogs and they've walked their dogs. And so it's really, you know, what really impressed me about what Denver Health has done is completely wiped the canvas clean and thought, how can we deliver our cardiac rehab program in a completely different environment? And I may have mentioned, I think they have a cutoff of 15 degrees, which is kind of chilly. They've only had to cancel class twice since they started this past summer. And yesterday they did their first virtual billable session where they actually, because it was pretty cold, I think, yesterday, and it went really well. You know, they had a couple little blips, you know, and things were tough with one of the patients with technology. But what I want to say about that is that's okay. And that's to be expected, that we're learning all of this together. And because we might have had an issue on the first virtual visit, doesn't mean we're going to have one on the second. Second one might be better. And then the third's going to be better. So be open and be creative. I added Amanda's email and phone number, and she would love to answer any questions. She couldn't be on the call today because she's out at the park with her patients. So feel free to contact her. She'd love to talk with you. Now, one of the things we need to think about is, you know, our title was Rehab and Exercise Sessions, because as Jared alluded to, rehab is more than just exercise. And I think we all know that, but we need to, that you went a little too fast with that one, Jared. That's okay, that's okay. They already saw the funny picture. The one thing I want to share with everyone is that we've been asking our patients to exercise on their own ever since I was a young clinician 34 years ago. And please note the hair, flock of seagulls. So asking patients to do exercise on their own is not a new idea or concept. We should have been doing this all along, and I know we are. So really we need to do what we've always done. So just for a moment, ignore the virtual sessions. So what do we do right now when patients come on site? We assess their ability to exercise at home on their own. We review target heart rates if they have one, RPE, signs and symptoms, what to do if. We assess whether or not that they have exercise on the days that, or I'm sorry, whether they're not, they're able to access and have, I'm reading this wrong, I'm sorry there. We need to assess what the patient has available to them when they're not at the center. And quite honestly, a lot of patients don't have anything. So we need to be creative. Soup cans, walking in the house, up and down the stairs. And as we said earlier with the Brigham group out in Massachusetts, every day does not need to be a cardio day. And the most important thing as we create exercise plans for our patients at home is, are they sustainable long after cardiac rehab is over? And again, think about the categories. So we have 3 different categories of remote sessions. We talked about already that there's some on-site sessions with the majority of activity being asynchronous. So we're not watching them. It's prescribed to the individual patient, and then they're reporting back to us. Then we have the virtual real-time full exercise sessions. And I would say that's similar to what Brigham Women's Center or Women's Health Center is doing, but it's really what we're seeing the most of is a virtual real-time session with some exercise and very heavily focused on the education. So what could that look like? Let's just give you a couple examples. So virtual sessions, again, can be with exercise, education, counseling and coaching, and support. And these can be done in a variety of ways, But remember, if it is a virtual billable session, we must have real-time observation of the patient greater than 31 minutes, and some amount of exercise needs to be in that session. And this is what it looks like with a lot of programs right now. It's a Zoom call. You can have anywhere from one patient where you're just doing that one-on-one, they're doing their exercise, you're spending some time with them, education and coaching. Many programs are going from the one to starting with about 6 patients, where the exercise physiologist or nurse who is observing is taking them through and leading them through a group activity similar to Brigham, and then providing cues and instructing, and then after that, going into an education session. Some of them, again, and this is just an example, spend about a couple minutes of the warm up, and then their exercise part of the virtual session, generally with most of the groups we're working with, is about 10 minutes long. And you can easily scale, so you can have patients that are a low level, a moderate level, and a high level. And as the exercise physiologist or whoever is leading that group activity, they are able to show each of the options, and then they can do that all together. And again, these are just some examples that you'll have for you, but one of the things that has been really a positive of the virtual sessions is that many of the programs are doing functional movements. So they're really doing a lot of things that are going to be important to that patient. So sit to stand, for example, and some sit and reach. Go ahead, Jared, to the next one. Picking something up, putting things in your cupboard, pushing and pressing. So you have a really great opportunity. Again, it doesn't have to be cardio, where we can truly focus on some of these functional movements for our patients. There's also a lot of self-guided videos. So feel free to take a look at Silver Sneakers. Intermountain Health has created a lot of great self-guided videos. And then of course you can create your own. And so hopefully this will play. This is our group out in Stony Brook, New York. So let's see if there's sound.
Hi everyone, this is Laura Mangano. I'm a physical therapist at Stony Brook Southampton Hospital, and I want to welcome you to the low intensity workout today. What we're going to need is a sturdy chair, no cushions on it, and no arms on your chair. We're going to be working side to side. We don't want any injuries. You're probably going to need some water and probably a towel to wipe off your sweat, and that's about it. So let's get started. Okay, let's get started. Arms out to the side. Come to the edge of your seat. If you need more
Jared, you can go ahead and stop. So we have many groups that are creating their own self-guided video. And those groups that are working with us in Chanl Health, they can actually send that to us. We put it into their dashboard, and then it's now available for that patient. And they can choose to follow that at any time. On their own asynchronously. That's not a billable session, but it's a very popular way to deliver home-based sessions for that patient. Now, the exciting news is many of you know Dr. Barry Franklin, and Barry Franklin and Dr. Zhu have put together, it just came out last week, they've published a home-based cardiac rehab document, booklet, that is available for purchase. It's a fantastic resource. If it's bought separately, it's about $10. But if you purchase them in quantities of 10 or more, they have a very large discount, and you would be paying about $3 for these. So I'm going to give you the how you can order these. You would order them from Healthy Learning, and that phone number, and we'll put this in the follow-up, 831-372-6077. So I'd really, really encourage you to reach out to Healthy Learning and purchase these and have them available for your patients. The other great resource is the AACVPR Remote Rehab Bundle, where you can just get, there's probably, I think there's about 8 different sessions where you can learn a lot about policies and procedures, risk stratification, types of exercise. Both this document, the home-based cardiac rehab document by Dr. Franklin and Dr. Zhu, and the fact that AACVPR has put together a comprehensive cardiac rehab home-based bundle to help us learn and implement tells me a lot of things. And one of the things it tells me is that virtual and hybrid is here to stay. And so how do we fold that into our current programs? And again, use it as a great complement during COVID, but more importantly, as we move forward in the future, how do we take this extra tool that we now have in our toolkit and reach more patients and deliver this amazing product that we know and love as cardiac rehab? And I'm going to stop, Jared, if you have anything else that you'd like to add.
That's great.
Barb, thank you so much. Jared, thank you so much. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the presentation, at the bottom of your screen, there's a fabulous little Q&A button. And several of you have already asked questions. And I wanted to wait to the end of Barb and Jared's presentation so we can voice them for everyone, because I'm sure several of you have similar questions. So the very first one, Barb, Christina asked, is the copay structure different for virtual or home-based programs?
So if you are going to bill a 93797, or if you are doing continuous telemetry 93798, the patient will be responsible for the exact same copay had they showed up at the center.
Okay, and with that code, Barb, with Anonymous asked, the 93797 code, they didn't catch the modifier that you stated that goes with that code. Could you please repeat that?
Of course. I think I know Anonymous too, Keith. I think I've met him several times. The P, it's a PO, so P is in Paul, O, PO modifier. And AACVPR has a great reference page on, it's a fact sheet on all of the billing for the virtual session. So I direct you to their website for that.
Okay. And then Arlene Gaw asked, will all patients start a virtual program at the same time?
Another great question, Arlene. It really, again, goes back to how your individual program wants to set this up. So if I refer back to Brigham, the way they're doing it is they've actually decided and determined to have a cohort of one group of patients going through 12 weeks of a once-a-week virtual session. But other programs are offering patients to join in. So they may have Monday at 8:30 and Wednesday at 8:30 and at 10 o'clock on Friday, just different variety and offerings where they will allow patients to join, similar to some of the programs that have open concept gyms now. A little more management of that, but so those patients can come and go as they choose. It's really, there's no right or wrong. This is something we're all kind of learning together. So just gonna have to try to baby step in and see what works best for your individual program.
Okay, and the first question we received actually came in through the chat function. And again, I apologize for forgetting to tell everyone to go to the Q&A. But Dee Dee Linen, someone I've known for years at Methodist in Omaha, Dee Dee wanted to make sure that there were copies. You guys might have handouts available. And ScottCare is recording this. It will be available on our website tomorrow. And I believe Jared and Barb have also given us permission to share their PowerPoint with you all. So if you would like copies of this, you can email myself, Kay Miller at ScottCare, John Jackson, or simply go to our website. We'll have all this on our website. We want you all to have this information. Barb, a couple of things. Frank Bender, you may have just answered this, but he wrote maybe possibly why you're answering it. What is the PO modifier?
Sure. Hi, Frank. I've spoken to Frank in the past. The PO modifier is telling the billing that this session was delivered at the patient's home. And that must accompany the 93797 for any virtual billable session.
And I'll just call out too that there is a few other small requirements for the billing of those home-based sessions. It's a one-time per patient rather than a per session modifier. So the PO modifier is all you need to do for each individual session. But there is a one per patient process. And again, AACVPR has a really good fact sheet. We can actually put a link to that in our slide deck when we send it out.
Thanks, Jared. Lori McWhorton wanted to know, have there been any issues with denials for home-based cardiac rehab?
Not to my knowledge. Programs that I know that have been billing have been receiving reimbursement and payment. So not to my knowledge, I don't think there's been any. Jared, have you heard?
No, I haven't heard of any denials.
That's good. Anonymous is back with another question. It says, so just clarifying, a physician does not need to be present, immediately available with virtual cardiac rehab. How does the group in Denver in a park meet the requirements of the physician?
So the one thing, that's a great question, is they have their emergency plan. So they can right now, remember, right now, direct physician supervision can be met through audio-visual real-time observation. So if they needed to have a physician, they could actually have that physician jump in audio-visual outdoors. But they're actually they're very, very, very close to their hospital, and they're in that same area. They have an emergency plan in place. And what I would suggest is someone reach out to Amanda specifically for their emergency plan. But that session outdoors is not a virtual billable session. They've moved their center outside, their center classes. It's a little bit different.
So that's a good point, Barb. Anonymous follows up, could be a different Anonymous. Can this also be used with the pulmonary rehab G codes?
The G0424 can be used as a billable virtual session. That is the only pulmonary rehab code that is allowable right now for patients to be billed at home. And we have several programs across the country that are doing this.
Okay, and Christina has a follow-up question. What if a patient is also receiving services from home health? Can they still attend virtual settings?
That is a phenomenal question, and that has been asked in the past. And what I have been directed really to share is you're going to have to ask on each, it's a per case situation. Some have, but it's a per patient request.
Okay. And Barb, I don't know if you and Jared have this answer, and I don't think we have anyone from the AACVPR board on today, but how can attendees receive the home-based bundle through AACVPR?
That's a great question. I think I'm not sure if it's been advertised yet. I know that they've done all of the recordings of the sessions. So I would reach out to Toya Davis at AACVPR and ask her. She'd probably be the one that would be able to at least direct you to the right part on the web page in their education area. But it's likely going to be released in the next week or so, I believe.
And I believe there'll be some announcements with it as well. So you'll get more information that way.
And then lastly, there's another one after this, but we have a statement, and maybe Barb, you or Jared can expand upon this. Karen LaFawn writes that their experience in Massachusetts is that there are some insurances that waive the copay if done virtually, and in some cases the copay may actually be higher. Karen says that she believes that checking with the insurance for that patient would be helpful so the copay information is accurate. What's your experience been?
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. I think we have heard of cases where some private or commercial insurers are waiving the copay if it's delivered virtually. We haven't heard of one where it's higher, but definitely if you're going to begin, contact the dominant payers in your area and find that out.
and I want to just add, so one of the reasons a virtual hybrid delivery model was created was there are many patients, and we have a group out east who told me, like just last week, 6 patients said no to on-site cardiac rehab because of their high copays. And they said to me, gosh, I wish we would have had this opportunity to do a hybrid with technology, because now that patient that comes, 3 to maybe 6 to 10 sessions on site eliminates a large amount of copay, but they're through technology able to use the platform, have interactions with their cardiac rehab staff. That's not including that virtual session that would have a copay. So every hybrid virtual program doesn't have to have a virtual billable session every time. So think back to what Jared was saying. We've got a virtual real-time observation, you've got asynchronous tasks, and we can do mixtures of that. But if you think about the specific individual patient, the one that has the high copay, who's going to say to you, I'm not coming to cardiac rehab at all, I can't afford it. Maybe they can afford 4 sessions, but everything else is then done asynchronously, yet still cohesively through the virtual program management software.
And the last question, Barb, this is almost tailor-made for you because of your previous experience with cardiac rehab. And Benjamin, this is from Benjamin Coons. And Benjamin, there's a little bit of a misnomer in your question, and I know Barb can explain this very well. Benjamin writes, traditional cardiac rehab requires EKG monitoring. Is it also a requirement, that's the key word, of virtual cardiac rehab? And if so, how is this done?
Great question, Benjamin. So again, I'm going to direct you back to the AACVPR FAQs on billing, because it is not a requirement to EKG monitor every single patient. So there are some patients who you should do ECG continuous telemetry monitoring. There's others who don't need it. And so there are programs right now, center-based programs, who bill a 93797, which means that patient comes in, they probably do a quick look, to make sure everything's looking good. And then that patient exercises, they go through the entire program, but they do not have continuous ECG monitoring. So that is a misconception. I'm not telling you not to monitor patients. I'm telling you not every single patient needs to be monitored every single session, similar to blood pressure. Now, transition that to the virtual world, you're likely going to be putting in low to moderate risk patients. I'd ask you to go back and look at the UCSF decision matrix again. A low to moderate risk patient is not going to likely need to be ECG monitored. So if you have someone who you think needs to be ECG monitored, maybe you're not going to put them in a hybrid home-based program. But step back for just a second. Those patients that are being monitored in your session now, you are asking them to go home and do exercise on their own without ECG monitoring. So just, kind of take a step back and think through these questions you're asking, and then think about how we really, really deliver cardiac rehab every single day. So hopefully that answered it, Keith.
It did, Barb. And I think the key point here, Benjamin, too, is just make sure you're using the right code. There's the same code to bill for non-continuous monitoring, and there's a different code to bill when you're using continuous monitoring. The curious thing is the reimbursement's the same.
It is.
I think it's very advisable to keep your patients in a safe condition, and those that are at high risk will benefit from being monitored, but don't limit the number of patients you can see by making every patient have to have full-time monitoring.
Mhm.
That's really what they're offering with this program. So Barb and Jared, thank you both so much. We've
Thank
gone
you.
through the questions. Again, we'll be making this recording available on our website by tomorrow. I believe we'll also have your PowerPoint handout, if that's okay, Jared, to make available to everyone tomorrow.
Yep.
So thank you all. Barb, I know that you've known Dr. Teresa Lee forever and ever, like I have.
You're aging us, Keith.
Well, I'm aging me. You guys are both still spring chickens.
Oh,
But
far from.
Teresa was the very first person that agreed to be a speaker for our spring conference. And I asked her what she would like to talk about. And she said, well, you know, I think I'd like to do something about staff competencies, but I'm going to make it fun.
Oh,
And with that, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back at 1 p.m. So everyone has 5 minutes. And Dr. Lee has promised us a fun presentation, and I'll have a much better introduction for you as well coming up, Dr. Lee. But I wanted to tease everyone with a fun presentation on building staff competency. So thank you all. We'll see you back at 1 p.m.